Hi everyone, welcome to DudeIWatchThat.com's continuing coverage of the 2021 Sundance Film Festival, and I'm here with the costume designer and the cinematographer of Superior, which is playing in the US Dramatic Competition. How are you guys?
Well, how are you?
Pretty good, thank you. This movie's great, and I'm glad I get to talk to you guys about these two details because in the costumes and the way it's shot, because I think both of these aspects contribute so much to the tone, the atmosphere, and I'm excited to be with you guys today. And yeah, right off the bat, I'll ask you both. I know Mia, you worked on the short that is kind of like this feature is kind of the sequel to of sorts, and I know Allison, you didn't, and I wanted to know how do you each know Erin, and how this came to be and working with her and whatnot.
Yeah, Erin and I did the short together. We were back in film school at NYU, and it was our grad second year project. And so I've been sort of a part of the world for, I don't know what, like 8 years now, 7 years. When did we make that? 2013 is when we shot that. And so it's sort of like it's sort of a sequel, more like a continuation. It picks up, not directly after the short finishes off, but about 6 years later. And the two sisters have been apart for basically all of that time. So we felt like it was really kind of a continuation of both their stories and also our artistic journeys together and our kind of collaboration, which was nice. We weren't trying to recreate the short at all, but we wanted them to be spiritual sisters for sure, in the look and in the tone and kind of how we approached the story from the very beginning.
For you?
I did not work on the short, but I think, let me see, someone recommended me for the project, and then I watched the short and I loved it so much, and I felt really connected with these two characters, the twins. And I was super interested in telling a story visually that involved identical twins and the challenges that would come from the costume design in particular. And I met with Erin, and we actually had a lot of musical taste in common. And that was something we discussed right off the bat about Marion specifically, because she's a musician, and all the bands that I thought of when I read about that character. And I'm happy that it worked out with Erin and I came on board.
That's cool. So did you kind of like, I don't know if I misinterpreted it, but did you also kind of like take into account to like, this is what their music taste would be like, and thus this is probably how they dress?
Well, Marion specifically, she like definitely, because she's a musician and music is such a big part of her life. And so that kind of informed the way I designed that character specifically. I know Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth was someone we were talking about, or Exene from X, Blondie. Those were all musicians we were kind of discussing. Young Marble Giants, and like visually what those bands looked like, 70s and 80s, was kind of informing Marion's style on camera.
Yeah, that's awesome. I haven't heard anything like that before. That's cool. I can definitely see that in it.
I think because the film takes place in 1987, I think that it's like one of the challenges in all of the departments was to kind of not make it an 80s film.
Yeah.
And I feel like I give Allie such major props for like never showing up with like giant shoulder pads for the sake of giant shoulder pads. I feel like it was such a nuanced approach to the 80s that was so much more like my own recollection of the 80s and that time, and like looking back at photographs and my family and everything. And but there's also sort of a, I don't know, there's such a magic in Allie's costuming that I really appreciate so much. And but it's nuanced, and it's very purposeful.
Yeah.
And I think Allie
It's
did
a-
such a good job.
Thank you, Mia.
it's cool to see the collaborators or like the collaboration on this was strong enough that you guys are able to reflect on it in that way. That's cool. And kind of spiraling off of that, I actually wanted to ask, in both of your departments, this does take place in the 80s, but it's not necessarily showy about it. It's not like, oh, look, this is pop culture reference from the 80s, and it's not that kind of portrayal of it, which I really liked. And I wanted to know how each of you approached it while still retaining a slight amount of subtlety and not being like too throwbacky about it, especially with the way that like in for me how it kind of has the look of some of the more iconic cult films of the early 80s. And yeah, I was curious how you guys managed that balance for each of you.
Yeah, for visually speaking, I think like we had maybe one reference from the 80s. We really were more interested in referencing like 1960s and 70s European and Eastern European cinema. We were kind of, I feel like it would be really easy to just point to the 80s films because it was such a big time for blockbusters and kind of Hollywood, and especially this is a thriller, so there's some like action elements and things to sort of say, oh, let's look at this. I think one of the American movies out of all of them, other than Rosemary's Baby, was maybe like Blood Simple. But most of our films, we were kind of looking for a subtler approach to references. And then our translation of that is really, it's kind of like a nostalgic factor from our own lives and how we remember those things and how we sort of, it's kind of like a softer, it's not neon lights and trapezoids, it's more like furniture that is passed down, or things don't have to be so spot on. It can be within like a 15-year period, more like how we normally live life. And then just kind of like turning that up a little bit to make it a little bit more stylized. And certainly in our lighting approach, I was really fascinated by more kind of old Hollywood style lighting when I first was starting out, and the mix of soft and hard light and how that kind of, how we can play with that in a scene and sort of, in a dream sequence in particular, that change between hard and soft and things like that. So I think we were trying to tap back into that way of looking at things. I think shooting on film was a big part of it as well. We knew from the outset that we wanted to shoot on film. We tested both 16 and 35 and ended up settling on 16 because honestly, our locations were really tiny and we just couldn't imagine shooting 35 in these tiny little rooms and cars and houses. And so we really, we felt like practically speaking, we wanted to shoot 35. And then also tone wise and feel wise, we liked the grain, the amount of grain, the amount of contrast and color saturation that we felt like we could get out of the 16 millimeter without sort of like hitting it over the top, like this is film. It was really, it's part of our working experience and blends into the aesthetic experience as well.
And for you?
In regards to costumes, I mean, it's true. I didn't want it to be like a caricature of the 80s. So I like to think of it as like Saved by the Bell versus Twin Peaks, like that kind of example. Like when you talk about all the examples Mia was bringing up, or Twin Peaks, that's a good example for me. It's like, it's understated, and maybe Vivian could be in the 80s, she could be in the 60s, she could be now. And I liked the idea of supporting the characters visually, and maybe the audience doesn't exactly know when the story is taking place. So I think it has definitely, it's set in 1987 and there's nods everywhere. I think specifically like the electronics, I feel like that's usually the telltale in films like this. But costume wise, yeah, I think I can't think of anything specifically that I was like, oh yeah, that's very 1987 that we did.
Yeah, interesting. It's cool to hear. I also wanted to ask about color, because color is so vividly presented in this film and it's kind of really integral to the tone of it. And I wanted to know specifically how you guys collaborated with each other to make sure that the costumes and whatnot were authentically presented in terms of their look and how colorful they were in the final product.
Yeah, I mean, we had like a group chat going on with all the creatives. So it was us, Aaron, our director, and also Maite, our production designer. And we would really just, Ali would send a dress or a couple options of a dress, or Maite would send some options for paint or backdrops or a chair or something like that. And we'd all just kind of talk about color and what works and what is like where we're going with things. And color was just like a constant conversation, I would say. I think the locations have a ton of color in them. So I like, when we're in a kitchen that's Miami pink, we kind of toned down the lighting choices, and I didn't feel like I needed to bring a ton of color in to sort of set the time of day or anything, because I felt like that was just gonna be too much, to compete with the walls and let the tone of the pink dictate what the time of day is. And as you're watching the film, you kind of will see what I mean. Sometimes it's like a very dark pink, and sometimes it feels a little bit more blush. And the bedroom is all blue carpet, blue bedspread, blue walls. It's sort of like we were surrounding our characters in color. The whole downstairs is green, walls, ceiling, everything is green. So I feel like we were constantly looking for ways to make sure the character stood out in the very colorful spaces. And we were kind of doing that with both lighting choices and then also wardrobe choices, and making sure that everything was in the same world, but without flashing or kind of becoming overwhelming for the senses. I feel like the whole film has a sort of richness to it without being necessarily an overload. It's like tastefully done, I think. And I give a lot of props to Erin, because I think she has good taste and she's able to sort of take away more often than add to things. And I think, Ali did such a good job of keeping the textures interesting and the silhouettes interesting. You talk more about it. Talk about your wardrobe design.
No, Mia, great transition. I think that there were definitely some challenges in the house itself where Vivian and Michael live and where Marion goes to stay. Like when you think about timeline, if Vivian comes in the front door where the world is green and she goes in the kitchen where it's Miami pink, what colors can Vivian be in her costume that are in line with her character that will like work in all those spaces? And I think, sometimes it was a rich jewel tone, and that's a color that Vivian kind of like comes into. She like starts out in like very neutral tones, like grays, like that tan trench coat we first see her in, and then she goes towards like richer jewel tones, like a dark green. And I had to work within this space that was super colorful, but also show each character's arc. And texture was also super important, like Mia said. If the world's so colorful that I can't really use color in a costume, to me, fabric and texture is just as important to tell the audience like who the character is. Like Vivian, she wears more precious fabrics and kind of like flouncy sleeves and more like classic cut 1950s, 60s dresses. And if it needs to be in a neutral color, like I need to tell that story with silhouette.
That's interesting. I kind of gather from both of your answers there, and I kind of want to throw this extra question in there. It sounds like this was a very collaborative and interchangeable process, like in terms of everything coming together. Was it like a very kind of interchangeable in terms of each department? Did Aaron try and create that environment so that each department could contribute to another if they had a certain idea or that kind of thing?
I wouldn't say interchangeable. I think we're all like super respectful of what we each bring to the table in terms of expertise in our own worlds. But you know, working with a director like Erin, she has such a firm hand for what she wants the world to look like. It's not necessarily micromanaging or anything, but it's this idea that you kind of know, you get into her head about where she wants this to go, and maybe because I've been working with her for so many years, I feel especially attuned to it. But she's not shy about references, and she's not shy about saying like, this is where I want to go, or this is, you know, I don't want to go that direction. And sometimes a director that can say no is like more valuable than a director that is just saying yes to everything to kind of like keep morale up. And so it's sort of, you know, we have a sure hand throughout the entire film of this director's vision. And I think that we all bring our own taste and our own sort of understanding of the material on kind of like a more than surface level to it. And so that's where it becomes collaborative, because we're all making suggestions or bringing things to the look that are in the same vein that she's already set up, but just kind of like further the vision. And we get to kind of play in this world and really go for it and not shy away from kind of taking it to the max, if I could use that 80s term. Which I feel like is really fun, and that's how the lighting becomes, you know, extra special and stylized, because we're not afraid to kind of go that way, or an angle. We can really push an angle or a move into a place that's more than just like a naturalistic, let's just tell the story. It's all about like using every single one of these elements to kind of further the vision overall.
Just to add to that, I think that it was just a super collaborative atmosphere with Mia, Aaron, director, and Maite, the production designer. The four of us, you know, we would be constantly kind of like floating ideas out to one another. Like the one of the last big scenes in the film is like the club scene when Marion's looking for Vivian, and something we discussed for a long time was, you know, what color is the stage going to be, the backdrop. And Mia and Aaron both felt like we needed to see maybe a different color that we hadn't seen in the film. And, you know, whatever decision we all came to for that, that's going to dictate the band flexes that was, you know, in that shot. And so I think it was just an ongoing conversation we had with each other throughout the entire film. And it was really refreshing that we were all like in tune with each other the whole time.
Yeah, and in that moment, there was lots of sending back and forth pictures of dresses.
Yeah.
Kelly would send a dress, Maite would send a color backdrop, Aaron and I would be on set shooting some other crazy scene, looking at that. Oh, I like the blue dress with the red background. No, I like the silver dress with the blue background. You know, we were really like mixing and matching and kind of all working from different corners of wherever we were, trying to put it all together. That's true.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it also was an independent film, which is like the nature of that, you know. It's like we got to make it work no matter what.
Yeah, and in the moment too, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, did budgetary restrictions and kind of the tight-knit nature of it all at all change either of your approaches to the way you did your job?
Of course. I mean, we all would have liked more prep time. We all would have liked more time on location or more time in discussion with each other. You know, Allie and I didn't meet until like the week before we were shooting in person, maybe when I crashed your fitting.
That was the first time I met Mia. Yeah, she showed up to our fittings. I was like, who is this person?
I like this. No, I don't like that. Yeah. I think, but that's what makes it fun. We're all living together in, Corning, New York, way upstate in a little corner of the state that we otherwise don't really get to go to as filmmakers, kind of just making it all happen. I think we all really cared about the material so much that we were really willing to do whatever we could to make sure the film got done. And I think out of restrictions, budgetary, schedule wise, I think come a lot of creative choices, because you have to really just work with what you got. And I think restrictions are a good thing for art. If you have too many choices or too much time to do something, it's not necessarily going to make it better. And of course, I would have, looking back on it, done this differently or that differently. But I also feel like this was a film of a time and a moment. And literally, if we had waited 2 more months or 3 more months to do that film, it wouldn't have gotten shot, because we shot it at the end of 2019. And so I think we're all very thankful that we kind of squeaked it out at the last minute before production really shut down. And we were able to make something without the threat of where we are now, the sort of pandemic and COVID and everything. So I feel very fortunate for that. And I'll take an indie film any day.
Yeah, I would say the more challenge for me was the location, not the budget level, just because we were, in this small town upstate, and I've weirdly now I had actually just designed Black Bear, which was in the Adirondacks, truly in the middle of nowhere. And then we did this movie, which was also sort of in the middle of nowhere. Like
culturally, it was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, like it was close to Ithaca, but I think Ithaca was like an hour away. And that's when, as a costume designer and like me sourcing things, I have to get like really creative and kind of like go into a bunch of random thrift stores or a bunch of random like menswear stores in Ithaca that I might not normally go to find like the perfect pair of pajamas for Jake Hoffman's character Michael to wear. The location actually becomes more challenging for me because of reasons like that, access to clothing and things like that.
That's cool. Yeah, and you bring up Black Bear, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but Black Bear and The Surrogate were 2 of my favorite movies of last year. So that's a cool detail. It makes me even more excited to talk to the both of you.
What I love about that is I shot The Surrogate in 2019, right? Spring of. And the producers then went from Surrogate, went from that straight to Black Bear. And they were producing that as well. So it's tandem pictures, same producers. But Allie and I didn't know each other yet.
Yeah.
We bonded over that later on.
That's cool. Yeah. Kind of all comes full circle.
I mean, it's a small world. Come on.
Making.
The film industry.
Yeah. Especially, all upstate New York. But what was it? Right. Even though again, like I mentioned earlier, only Mia, you had worked on the short. How much of, I guess, a focus was put on towards making a continuation of the characters or the story itself, or the atmosphere, specifically in terms of the way it's shot? Did you know going in that it was still going to be on 16 millimeter? Was that the type of thing where it's like you wanted to continue that kind of atmosphere? And for the costumes, did you at all try and make it a thing where it's like, I wonder how, based on how they dressed this 5 years ago, I wonder how they would now, type of thing?
Yeah, it was, we knew we wanted to shoot film. Erin and I have always shot film together. This was, I think, our 7th or 8th project together. I shot 4 of her films, and she shot a couple of my films, and we kind of collaborated on a couple other things in between. And we almost always shoot film together. And our last short that we did is called Valeria, and that was on 35. And it felt like such a different experience to shoot 35. We were shooting in this big mansion on the Upper West Side and this big house in South Brooklyn, and the scale of things just felt so much bigger. We were suddenly shooting 4:3, and we had all this headroom, and it was just like a very different process, kind of both emotionally and aesthetically, to shoot 35. I'm really glad that we did that together, because I think that film has a very special look to it. But when we sort of started looking at Superior, the short, Walking and Falling is another short that we did together on 16. We kind of wanted to go back to that, and we felt like we could make it make sense to jump to 35, because it was like this evolution of characters, but we felt like we wanted it to be more of a continuation in terms of style and look. I think in terms of talking about the characters and what they have sort of accomplished or haven't accomplished in pre-production, we've kind of talked a lot about who the characters are, what they're like, would we be friends with them, how we want to get into their emotional state at any given time, so that we can sort of know where to put the camera, because we can know, oh, she's on a phone call with the police in the other room, let's be really far away and slowly creep in, so that we can kind of understand the psychology of this moment when she feels like the world is starting to close in on her, or it's a scene where we are seeing the two of them for the first time looking alike. We want to be the third twin, as we said very often. That was kind of a joke on set, that I was the third twin all the time, because we wanted to be right in them connecting very closely. So we started to write our own new rules for the new story, and keeping in mind where we had been. And I think then also working wise, we made that when we were in grad school, and we've both have professional careers and have done other things since then, and shot other projects and learned a lot from our experiences. And when we were making those films in school, we knew nothing. We were just kind of throwing the camera wherever and hoping that it turned out okay. Now we had to contend with our own successes and failures that we were bringing onto set this time around. We weren't kind of our raw selves that we were in film school. So it was a little tough, because we enjoyed so much freedom, even though we didn't know what we were doing in a lot of ways when we were in school on the shorts that we were doing. But now we also had budgets to answer to and schedules to answer to. So we were glad to have the professional experience to kind of call on and back us up. And it was a new experience, if not an evolved experience. There's a couple of callbacks though. There's one direct reference to the short, and there's a couple other moments that are a little bit homage to our previous work together, which was fun to kind of try and recreate with our newfound information and expertise that we gained in the last 7 years since we first met.
It's interesting what you were saying, Mia, because to me, the short is sort of about these twins and their connection. Very visually, they're wearing like the exact same thing. I think in most of the short, they're wearing the same costumes, but the feature is more about like visually showing their journey as sisters and becoming less estranged. And that is shown through, they start out as these two completely different characters visually in their dress, and then they kind of like begin to mesh together and kind of take on each other and become each other's version of themselves. So I think the short wasn't super informing for me in that respect, because I think they're super connected in the short, and they're not really in the beginning of the feature.
Yeah, they're both. I mean, they're two different coming of age films too, just sort of theme wise. In the short, the teenagers, and they're trying to figure out who they really are, especially apart from one another. And in the feature, it's more coming of age that you experience in your 20s or late 20s, 30s, about what you want to be, and where you want to go. And so I think we tried to bring those two different themes into it.
Interesting. Yeah. That's all the questions I have, but thank you guys so much for your time. This movie was great, and I really liked both the costuming and the way it was shot. So yeah, just one last little tidbit. I don't know if either of you guys have this information, but since both screenings of the movie are sold out, I can't necessarily plug that to the audience. Do you guys know anything about where the film's going to go after Sundance? Do you know if there's a plan for more festivals or perhaps distribution or?
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think if you have a festival pass, you can still reserve tickets.
Yeah, I think so.
But
Yeah, you can watch it on demand with a festival pass.
Yeah, but you can't buy a ticket to the screening, just a single ticket. So you can plug that part.
Yeah.
The trailer, it's not a trailer, it's like a scene from the film is coming out tomorrow. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. Definitely throw that in there. Perhaps.
Yeah. I think Deadline is releasing a scene. It's the like very opening scene of the film.
That's awesome.
So
yeah.
Have you seen that, Allie?
No, I don't even know that's happening.
Aaron literally just texted me before I signed on and said, "Hey, just found out this is getting released."
That's exciting.
Yeah,
it is exciting. Hopefully.
I was like, "Oh shit, let me watch that." They're still cleaning it.
Oh wow.
Send it back for more dust busting and VFX. I mean, that's the thing about shooting film, right? It's
never over.
It's never over. There's always dust or hairs to clean off of it. But I'm excited to see. Who knows? It's a funny film.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for this interview.
And thank you guys.
When will this be released?
I believe it's embargoed until after the premiere. So probably at, I guess, what is it, 10:37 EST on Saturday night. So yeah.
That's my favorite time of day.
Yeah, me too. It's good that they timed the movie to end exactly then. But yeah, thank you again so much.
That's great.
And, congrats and good luck and everything. Nice to speak to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.